What is up, guys, and welcome back to Greedy Pete's Garage. On today's episode, we're putting an engine together. Got my trusty professional engine builder, master builder, helping me out today. Hopefully he can keep his shedding to a minimum. But we finally got our engine back from Opel Engineering after, I think it was close to 10 months at the machine shop. We finally got it back. Not really, it's not their fault for the time frame. It was more so just waiting on parts, finding dimensions and specifications to make sure that we had everything set and everything was correct and right. But we finally got it back. Everything's balanced, got the crank polished, got the head and the block decked. One thing to note is when you do get your engine decked, make sure to include the front cover to have them cut it all at one time, because if you don't, you'll go to put your head on and it won't fit. The front cover is located with these two little dowel pins, so there's not much play that you can mess with, if any at all. So make sure that you're including that and that they do cut it at the same time. I do have the block already painted. I'll put in a little time lapse of doing that when we start getting into some of the assembly. But I had them oven baked the block, and then I cleaned it up and painted it with the high temp ceramic engine paint by Eastwood with their activator. Came out extremely nice. Any sort of like imperfection in the block, it was honestly just from the block casting. It's not from the paint job itself. It leveled out extremely well. It's extremely hard and durable now. And I actually applied it with just simple chip brush, real cheap. Make sure that you pick out any of the hairs that that may come off during painting. But I found it to apply much better with the chip brush than a foam brush. I actually tried starting with the foam brush, but it just wasn't laying out as nicely. It's a little too thin. You were able to get a bit more paint on the chip brush than with the foam brush. And the nice part about this stuff too, if you do miss spots and it hardens, you can just scuff up the surrounding area and paint right over it. I'm most likely going to have to do that. I did miss, a couple spots here and there. Same thing on the front cover. And then as well as when I do the water pump housing and the neck and all that, and some of the accessories, I'm going to have to paint those at the same time. So not worried about any little spots that I miss. At the end of the day, the truck is going to be a driver. I'm trying to make everything as nice as possible, but at the same time, I'm not going to lose my mind, at least try not to lose my mind while putting this thing together. So we've got all of our pistons and rods laid out. Everything is balanced and marked to make sure that we're putting them back in the correct place. I did have to have my piston skirts coated because the piston to wall was pushing after it was honed, was pushing almost 4 thou, 3.5 to 4 thou, which probably would have been okay, but I'm keeping this engine for the long run. So I wanted to make sure that it's right. Right now with the coating, it's sitting right at 2 thou. So we're good to go on that. Let's see. One other note is when you're assembling stuff, you want to try to get lint-free rags. As you can see, when I was applying some oil onto the surface, this is not imperfections in the machining. It's actually little pieces of lint. That was my bad, but it's okay. We're gonna clean everything down with brake clean, make sure it's really nice and fresh when we do start assembling everything, so I'm not too worried about it. But make sure that you get some lint-free rags. A little hack is to actually get some pee pads for dogs. These work great, and there's almost no lint to them. Gives you a nice clean work surface so you can lay everything out, make sure everything's set. We'll go over part numbers as they come up. This is the part number for my rings. It is an aftermarket company, but from what I've read on the internet, everything's great with these rings. There's no issue. Same thing with the engine bearings. The mains are, here's the part number for that guy. So these are the mains, and then when I'll have to find the box for the rod bearings. But we'll go over all that. I'm going to start setting my piston ring gap. We're going to go 20 thou on the top ring and 25 thou on the bottom ring. I'll pull these guys out. So our top ring is the square side. That's going to be 20 thou, and our bottom ring is going to be 25 thou. The reason that you do that is there's a bit more heat in diesel engines while they're running, so you actually gap the second ring a little bit looser than the top ring to accommodate for that heat expansion. So we're going to start working on getting these filed down. I'm going to start with my awesome, super precise ring grinder. Put it at a really low speed. I'm going to try one. Hopefully it goes smoothly. If it does, great. We'll finish off the rest this way. If not, then I'll get one of those hand crank ones, because right now the ring is at 16 thou for my ring gap on the top. So we got to take off 4 thou, 2 thou per side, but we'll just knock it down on one side. It'll be fine. Hopefully I can manage that, but we will see. So guys, I got this ultrasonic cleaner to try and clean some of these parts as well. It was an Amazon special, about 160 bucks. This one seems to be the best option. The Vevor options that are out there seems to be kind of like a hit or a miss, whether they actually work or not. Or I should say the repeatability. I've seen lots of comments where works great for the first couple of times and then they fail. Most of the time I saw that it was because of the electronic digital panel, the control panel. This one is just old school, knobs. So we're gonna try this guy out. It wasn't too bad. Archie's definitely excited about it, but it's kind of funny. The shop is turning into something else. It looks like a surgery's going on. Now we're in a food kitchen, we're serving a can of whoop ass or something, but we're gonna give it a go. I'll show you the parts before and after and see how they come out. Alrighty, got this set up here. This is kind of what the parts look like. Not terribly dirty. I mean, I think they're gonna clean up nicely, but still gummy nonetheless. The bolts are honestly dirtier than anything, and we're gonna try running some PSC 1000. This stuff has worked out pretty good for me so far. One of my co-workers recommended it to me, and I really like it. So we're gonna try it in here and see what happens. It's definitely doing something. Alrighty guys, I got my oil squirters installed. My engine builder put a nice little note in there for me. One thing to note is to make sure that you put your piston into the bore and that your oil squirter aligns into that hole. This one right here that I'm pointing to. If you don't, you're not gonna have adequate cooling for the head of the piston. and that's you want to keep this piston as cool as possible, especially if you're running any sort of aftermarket injection pump and turbo, because the more heat, the more likely for pre-detonation slash cracking of a piston, and that's just not good. So we got those lined up. That was a real pain, in all honesty. These oil squirters are actually pressed in, or in my case, nice big brass hunk of brass that I just used the little peen. These little Harbor Freight hammers are honestly the best. They're like $3, and I use it all the time. So I just essentially got it lined up the best that I could. I tapped it in a little bit into the bore with a smaller piece of brass to get it lined up. Checked my alignment, made sure that it was good, and then started hammering down. Now, one thing to note is to grab the dimension before you pull them out of the block. You want to measure essentially from the top of the head to that flat face right here. You want to measure to that flat face so that you have sort of like a installation depth. Unfortunately, I goofed and I forgot to grab that dimension before I actually pulled them out, and I had to make a custom holder out of some 17.4 H900, really strong stuff, so that it wouldn't spread apart. I'll show you that in just a minute. But basically what I did is, you can see if I can get the lighting right. You can see there's that line right there. I just measured the distance from that line to the edge of the oil squirter. And then there's also a chamfer in the block. I don't know if you can see that. There's a chamfer in the block, which is roughly 125 thou. So basically this distance from that line to the bottom was 450 thou in mine, and then plus the 125, so 575. And then I took the overall length, and then that's where I got my 570. So it was 1 inch 145 minus 570 gave me the 570 install height. So basically I just grabbed one of my spare calipers, set it to 570, and then periodically checked the distance to the face of that face of the block to the top of the head, and that told me how far the oil squirters were installed. This is the custom tool that I made to pull the oil squirters out of the block. It's kind of like that shape of the profile, and it slides over the head. And then this is a little retaining collar that has a groove for the oil squirter nozzle to clear. And then this guy right here attaches to a slide hammer. But in my case, I actually ran a bar across the bottom deck of the block and then put tension onto that oil squirter with a piece of threaded rod, and then put tension, and then used my slide hammer to impact it to pull them out. These suckers are in there. They're deep in there. It's a really tight press fit, but that's what I ended up doing. I'll insert a picture of the little tool that I made with the adapter. Now, I think you can maybe buy these still. If you search through the Mercedes manual, there is a part number for this tool. I don't know how much it is, but for something that you're only probably going to use once, you may just want to try and make it. So that's what I would recommend doing. So now that I got my oil squirters in, we are going to put our rings onto our pistons, get everything nice and clean, reorganize, get everything laid out nicely, and then probably set our crank in and then set our rods in. Alrighty guys, so I'm going to start torquing down our main caps. I forgot to press record when I actually set the crank in, but I just Made sure all the surfaces were clean, and then I threw down some assembly lube. This stuff goes really, really far, so you don't need to glob it on there. It really spreads. So the instructions say, the Mercedes manual says to start at the thrust bearing and then work your way out. So we're actually going to do it in 2 stages. There's the torque spec is 55 Newton meters plus 90 degrees. We're actually going to go 25, then 55, then the 90. It's probably not necessary, but it'll just more so peace of mind for myself. But we got the good old snappy tech angle. As you can see, got it set at 25 Newton meters. Shout out to Marcus for lending me this. So yeah, we're going to start off with the thrust bearing. No interference issues. And then we're going to grab a paint marker, and we're going to just for sanity's sake, we are going to mark all of our main cap bolts with a line onto our actual caps, and then we're going to set our angle to 90 degrees, and we're going to go 90 degrees and make sure to verify from the initial mark that we are at 90 degrees. I highly recommend that you mark the caps, even if you do have a fancy torque wrench like this, simply just because I almost goofed and did this one twice. Then I just double checked before I started pulling it, because if you didn't have these marks, you would have no way of knowing if you actually went 90 degrees. So, you know, these aren't the cleanest lines, but I'm kind of relying on the torque wrench to ensure that I did go 90 degrees. Because, like, for instance, this one looks a little off, but the torque wrench said 90 degrees. I heard it beep. I'm fine with it. So same thing with this one, you know, it kind of spread it out because of the oil that was on there. But yeah, definitely mark your bearing caps and the bolts before you do this sequence. It's extremely important that you follow the specification. Again, one finger. There's a little bit of drag, but that's just from the assembly lube that's on the bearings itself for startup. One thing that we're going to have to check is the axial play in the crankshaft. What we're going to do is I'm going to grab my dial indicator and throw it on the end of the crank and put a little pry bar and see how much play we have axially in the crankshaft. The specification is right there. And then these are the thrust bearing washers. They're actually bearings that go right here. The nice thing about it is, say you do have too much axial play, you can pull off this cap and replace the thrust bearings. You have to kind of fish them out, but you are able to change them out if you have to. Most of the people that I've seen that have either flip-flopped the bolts for if you're converting to a rear sump, you can pull off this one cap and one other cap, and it's not going to throw the crankshaft out of whack. So if you have to, you can. It's no big deal. These are the part numbers for the different thicknesses. From factory, this one had the -01 in it. So that's what's in there right now. We're going to measure out that radial play with the indicator and see where we're sitting. So we're sitting right at about 5 thou total. That's almost nominal. It's a little under nominal. I'm probably just going to leave it. That seems like a good fit. It's got a good sweep. I'm not using a giant pry bar or anything to get that, so I think we're good to go. Everything spins nice and smooth. I think we're going to set our rings onto our pistons now and start setting pistons in. Found out some bad news when I was going to pull out my rear sump oil pump. This little ear actually got cracked off. So what we're gonna do is cut a little bracket that goes from this hole to this hole. This is gonna be a support, and then we're gonna prep and weld this the best that we can to try to fix this, and then we'll leave that little bracket down that we make to get it in line. We're gonna leave it, and we're gonna get a new bolt to compensate for the thickness of it. When you're storing parts on a long-term project, make sure that they're packaged well and that they don't get damaged. That was a real bummer, but it is what it is. These pumps are super expensive if you can find them. I got a deal on one with the rear sump pan quite some years ago. This actually may have been cracked then. Who knows? But it is what it is. We're just going to go forward and do the best that we can. It really sucks because when your actual inlet from or your outlet from the oil pump to the rest of the block, that's your galley hole. So you want to make sure that this is fully pressed down and that you have full support so that you don't have like an intermediate oiling issue. We're gonna pray that our fix solves the issue. This is the original pump for the front sump. It looks like they actually had this a bit thicker than this. Here, I'll slide that up there. So they may have actually had issues with that before. Who knows? But it is what it is. We're just gonna do the best that we can.